Hi, everybody. Welcome to our latest edition of Fiction in Real Life. I'm Jennifer Moore, and we have Heather Moore, Julie Daines, Jen Geigle Johnson, and today we have a special guest with us, Nancy Campbell Allen, that we're very excited about. Julie has some book news to share with us before we start with our stories.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that my book Meriden Park is coming out in December. And so I'm going to be looking for people who want to be on the street team and help kind of promote this book. And you also get a cool swag package and a free electronic copy of the book. So if anyone's interested in that, look at my Facebook page, Julie Daines Author, for information on how to sign up.
Cool. Thanks, Julie. And you can find it because it has a spooky top thing on your
It's called
Facebook.
Truly Julie.
What is that thing called? Your banner?
My header. Yeah.
Header. Yeah. It's spooky. Truly Julie. Okay. So with our special guest, Nancy Allen, you may know her from her steampunk books like Beauty and the Clockwork Beast. She has some Regency books like the My Fair Gentleman and The Secret of the India Orchid. She has some older books that one is a time travel. She has tons and tons of awesome books that I love, and they're all romantic and they're all fun and witty. And this is her latest book to capture his heart. And that we're going to give that away to a commenter. So let's start. Nancy has some stories for us.
Okay, so these both involve my parents, and one is funnier than the other one. So I'll start with the not funny one first. I mean, I guess it depends on your sense of humor, but my dad was military age right at the time when the Civil War was happening, when the Vietnam War was ramping up. And he was in school and his draft number had come up a couple times, and he was like, he had exemption because he was in school, and he'd already served an LDS proselyting mission to Brazil. So he was, past, 22, 23 years old. And his friend had said, I did this thing where you can enlist and you can do things like background checks and things like that just here stateside, and that will satisfy the requirement. So, you should maybe do that. And so he thought, okay, I'll try that. That will keep me from having to go to war. And so that was the plan. So he signs up and he gets put in this class. He has a real affinity and a penchant for learning language as well. And so he was put in this class where they were going to be spies and sent to Czechoslovakia. And I don't know what was happening there at the time, but they apparently needed some spies. So he was with this class, and they would dump, there was like 30 of them, I think. And they would put all of these guys in a city that they weren't familiar with. And so his was Milwaukee, and they dumped him in the middle of Milwaukee, and he had to do things like lose the tail. These people were following him, so he had to lose them. And then there were times when he would have his door banged on in the middle of the night and people were in there trying to make him, blow his cover and everything. And you had to pick a name that you could remember easily. And so he picked his high school girlfriend's last name, which my mom never really liked after the fact. But so he was good and he passed all his little tests and everything. And we used to love hearing these stories when he was a kid, when we were kids. And so then right as he was ending nearing the end of his training, the war effort kind of ramped up and they were needing more troops. And so he and the whole class, rather than going to Czechoslovakia, they were put on a plane, and big long flight, and the cargo door opens in the back of the plane, and the GI standing on the runway says, "Welcome to the Far East." So he spent a year there in Special Forces A camps, working with these Green Berets. There were 2 guys from each class that would go, and they were stationed at these A camps. And they had these mines, I want to say they're Claymore mines, but I don't know that that's really the name. And they were the ones that would say front toward enemy. And so you would make sure that you had it pointed in the right direction. And when they would wake up in the morning in these camps, the mines would be turned around because someone in the camp, there were spies everywhere. And he said he has a bunch of pictures of sunrises because he was always really glad to see the sun come up for that whole year that he was gone. So I was thinking, of course, as an author, that's kind of a heavy one, but would I, I'm asking my own question, but you guys are going to be asking yourselves, but would I write something like that into a story where he's thinking it's one thing and then it's completely not that thing at all?
So did they not tell him They just thought they were going to their spy missions, and they opened the
He
door and
knew,
they're like, "You're in Vietnam."
he knew right before they went. So it wasn't like he had a whole lot of time to stress about it, which is probably a good thing. But yeah, it was really sudden.
But you had
Great.
all that spy training, and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden, yeah.
So
What
then
do
he
you
was,
think, Heather?
oh, sorry.
That's okay. Heather, would you book it?
Yeah, I would book it, but I would tell Nancy to write it.
Yeah.
Because, it's her family story, but I thought it was super intriguing because when I wrote my Cold War story a couple of years ago, I studied like the entire, just from basically 1945 to 1989. And during that, Czechoslovakia, all those countries, a lot of them were under Soviet control and or they're bordering Soviet controlled countries. And so definitely there's a lot of spy work going on. So it sounds super fascinating to me. So I'd love to hear it or,
Great.
read a story like that.
What do you think, Jen? Would you book it?
Yes. Now, Julie, I know you're going to be so sad to hear this, but my book it signs did not make it to Utah with me. So I would book it. I do not have one of the 6 beautiful signs that Julie printed and sent to me, but I also would want to at least interview Nancy. That's a fantastic story and I love it. So the historical fiction side of me would just drip with happiness all over that. That's pretty awesome.
And Julie, what about you?
I would have to say probably no. And it's a super fascinating story, but I just do not do war stories. I have a really hard time with war stories. I can hardly ever watch a movie that has to do with the war. I feel like just the loss of life is too overwhelming for me, and I just avoid that topic almost unanimously. So for me, it would probably be a pass, even though it's a super cool story. And I'm glad that you have that for your family history.
That is cool. I'm kind of like both. I think I would book it, but I would have to soften it to like he ended up somewhere else that wasn't Vietnam. And obviously that's where in the end, you know what I mean? Because it's a story. In the end, that's where he's glad he went, but he did all that training and then ended up where he didn't think he was going to be. I love that. So yeah, I would book it and I would ruin it by changing it. But sorry, I'm scared of Vietnam. Okay, and you said you had another story for us.
Yeah, Vietnam is never a big. I mean, So right before this kind of ties in. After he'd done his training in Milwaukee, my dad came home and it was like after the New Year, and my mom had come over from Norway. She was Norwegian and lived with an aunt, and she was in the same kind of social area, mixing in the same church social circles that he did. And so he went to this party. It was like a New Year's party or something. And he said, "Who's that really pretty blonde in the corner?" And they're like, "Oh, she's from Norway. She doesn't say much, because my mom, she said plenty, but only on her terms." So he's like, he's going to try out his new skills. And so he goes over and sits by her and he starts talking. And he's like, "Hey, I've been to Norway." And she was like, she just lit up like a Christmas tree, "You have? Where were you?" And he said, he picked the capital, which is easy enough. He said, "I was in Oslo and blah, blah, blah." And there was that huge park. And there's this enormous famous park in Oslo and everything. And so she was just eating it up. And they talked for like an hour and he had her going. And then finally he said, "I have to tell you, I've really never been there." And she just looked at him with this deadpan face and got up and grabbed her purse and left. So then he gets her number and calls her like a week later and says, "Hey, I met you at the party. Would you like to go to dinner or something?" And she says, "Sure." And so he was kind of surprised, but he went to pick her up, got her address, and she opens the door and goes, "Oh, it's you." Someone else. And so he's like, "Yeah, but do you want to go to dinner anyway?" And so they went out and then they dated for a few weeks, and it was like almost right before he had to go. And so he's like, I got to go to war. And they wrote letters for that whole year that he was gone. In the middle of it, something must have clicked because he sent her a wedding or an engagement ring. And she put it on and went skiing, and he got home and they were married 2 weeks later. And kind of the funny thing there is that he kept going to school and was eventually a marriage and family therapist and taught in the Child and Family Studies department at Weber State. And so he would always tell people, I don't recommend doing this the way that we did it, because we dated for a total of, I don't know, 3 weeks. But it worked. And then she passed in 2012, but they were married for a good long time and had 5 kids, and it worked out, even though he was such a jerk in the beginning.
I love it. I would book it because it's a romance, and I love the idea that he had to like super apologize and kind of prove himself, because he probably went into it thinking, oh, whatever, I'm just meeting someone. I'm not looking for, like a long-term thing. Also,
She's gonna laugh and think it's funny.
it will be, whatever. How did he find? I guess he must have like had his mom help him get an engagement ring from Vietnam. You know what I mean? He didn't like buy it in Vietnam, right?
He looked in like a LaBelle's catalog, and he ordered it and had it sent from wherever it was sent. So it was like a mail order thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about
sweet
Julie? Would you book it?
I think I would book it, actually. I think it's a great story. It's so fun. In my own life, I'm not sure I could have forgiven him, because one of my biggest pet peeves is when people lie. Like, that is something that is so hard for me to get over, when people lie. And so that would be hard, but I do think it would make a really, really fun and a cute little romantic story. It's really sweet. He did it for a joke, but then his feelings ended up being really sincere, and then he kind of had to backpedal. It's classic. I love it.
You too. Jen, what about you?
I agree. I'd book it. I'd like the redemption thing he'd have to go through, like you said, Jennifer. Like, it's fun, I think, to write and read a guy who just really grovels for a while, So I think that would be a fun aspect to the story.
And Heather, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely bookable. I thought that, because you do read like kind of romantic comedies where maybe there's a bet going on, or if you talk to that girl or date that girl or whatever. So it kind of reminded me of that a little bit, but I could kind of see like your dad's point of view, as far as I'm just going to talk to her, make her feel comfortable. And, because she's just kind of by herself in the corner at this event. And then he ends up just, hey, I really like this girl and I want to ask her out. So how am I going to do this? So his conscience kicks in, right? Which is a good sign. So then he kind of has to backpedal and just take that risk of, hey, I'm sorry, I actually haven't been. And then he waits a week, which tells me for a whole week, he's probably feeling really guilty. And then calls her, and then he's like, oh, then it's like the high and low. Oh my gosh, she said yes. And then show up, she didn't know it was me. Right. And then just right back down again. So it is a fun. I mean, there's all those emotions in there. Obviously a true story, even though it has some elements in there that are like, oh, I don't know if I would, let him get off that easy. But anyway, but obviously your mom saw it, that he had good intentions, but he just needed to maybe mature a little bit.
Well, to make it even worse, I forgot to mention she was really, really homesick at the time. So it hit super hard. She was like,
like, finally, I can share this. Yeah.
And he's
Does
like,
she speak English really well? Like,
They learned from like first grade on. She spoke English and German. It was like part of the curriculum.
Really fluently.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Good stories. Thank you, Nancy Campbell Allen. And just a reminder, we are giving away Nancy's book to a commenter to capture his heart. It just came out like 2 weeks ago or something, right? Just barely. It's brand new, brand spanking new off the presses. Don't forget to send us your stories. It's so fun. It's my favorite thing to open them up. We have the funnest stories sent in. Funny first dates, embarrassing moments, practical jokes.
And as the holidays approach, we're definitely looking for any kind of Thanksgiving related, Christmas related stuff.
Yeah. Disasters that happened at your family party, or fun traditions you have, or weird traditions your grandma used to do, or something that your neighbor does on the holidays that no one can believe, or whatever. Anyway, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Fiction
and
real
life.
We're so good.